Hey there, welcome to episode 196 of Mike's Collection. I'm Mike, and the part of my collection that I'm going to be talking about today is Wave 8 of Mattel's Masters of the Universe Origins figures. So, like most of the previous waves, which I have previously reviewed all in a bunch of different videos, I have reviewed waves 1 to 7, as well I've also reviewed some odds and ends, like some deluxe figures, some vehicles, some of the Masters of the Universe WWE crossover figures. So if you're interested in any of the prior releases, you can find those videos on my channel. But anyway, like most of the other waves, there are 4 figures in this wave. And there's some interesting characters in this particular selection, including this little guy here, which we're going to talk about in detail in a couple of minutes. But yeah, it's a cool wave. I've had it for a few weeks now. I actually got it at the same time as I got Wave 7. Oddly enough, like I had pre-ordered all of these figures from Big Bad Toy Store. So I pre-ordered Wave 7, Wave 8, and then I got a shipment from them, which was 3 of my Wave 7 figures and 1 of my Wave 8 figures. So I kind of had to sit on them for a while because I wanted to wait until they sent me the 4th Wave 7 figure so I could actually do my Wave 7 video. And it took them a couple extra weeks, but by the time they mailed my missing Wave 7 figure, which was the Sorceress, they sent it along with the other 3 Wave 8 figures. So I had them all at once, essentially. So I already did the Wave 7 video, and now I'm going to touch on Wave 8. It's a pretty cool little wave, and I don't know if I have much more to say about it, so why don't we just dive right into it. So let's first up take a look at Anti-Eternia He-Man. So this is the He-Man from Anti-Eternia, hence the name. So Anti-Eternia, I guess, is the equivalent of like the negative zone in Marvel comic books, or the mirror universe in Star Trek or something. It's like a reverse bizarro world of the world we know. And so yeah, this guy is the He-Man of Anti-Eternia. So instead of being the most heroic person of the world, he's the most evil person in the world. And yeah, it's a pretty cool figure. It's very simple to construct, but it's effective. I think he looks really great. Now, really, before we get into talking about the figure too much, every one of these Origins figures, they come with their own little accessories. It varies by figure, but they also each come with a little mini comic book. And every figure in the wave comes with the same comic book, which introduces all the characters in the wave. So you see here, this wave contains Sunman, which we're going to talk about in a minute. So he's on the cover of the book. You also see Clawful, who's another one of the characters in this wave. So as you open up the short little comic book here, you see that Skeletor has summoned Anti-Eternia He-Man. He's talking to his henchman Clawful there. You also see these Horde Troopers at the start when He-Man's tearing through them all. The Horde Troopers are also part of this wave. So yeah. As we go through, eventually Sunman shows up, and yeah, so that's where we get all the characters. So it's just, you see, it's only a handful of pages, but it's a nice little introduction to the characters for, like, I feel I know a lot of these characters pretty well, but, these are brand new toys. There's no, well, I was going to say there's no cartoon to support it. There is currently 2 Masters of the Universe cartoons, but they're based in kind of a different continuity than these Origins figures. So kids might not be familiar with some of these concepts presented here because they don't appear in either of the animated shows. So it's nice that these little comic books introduce you to the concepts behind some characters. The toys also come with a little sheet like this that tell you where the removable parts are. So this is an aspect I don't really touch on when I've reviewed these figures in the past, but they are, they have a lot of interchangeable parts. So if you want to swap heads and boots and arms and, even their little crotch pieces there, you can really create some interesting new characters if you want to break up your figures and swap the parts. It's not really something I'm into, but yeah, it could be fun. And definitely if you were a kid playing with these, it adds some play value for sure. Okay, so Anti-Eternia He-Man. So you can see here, he is pretty much jet black as far as his skin. He's got red eyes, but they've got like white centers in them. So it gives him a very evil look. Then he's got this kind of reddish hair, the reddish shorts, the reddish boots, red belt, red cuffs. Not a whole lot of color on this guy, but like I said, it's this is just a repaint, but it's a very effective repaint. I think it looks really cool. Now, this is exactly the same figure as we previously got with He-Man. So you can see here, the boots, the legs, the hands, the harness there on the chest. Now you'll notice the heads are different here, but we do have this head. I could display this He-Man with this head if I wanted to. This head here is based off of the vintage toy. So that very first He-Man that came out in 1982, he looked like this. And then when the Origins line first came out, like 2 years ago now, they based these toys on the vintage 80s figures. They've got the same proportions. They're kind of short and squatty. They just increased all the articulation. So unlike the vintage toys, you can move their arms out. They've got wrists that turn. They've got elbows. They've got knees. The vintage figures didn't have any of that. They got a boot cut. They've got ankles. I'm not really going to cover the articulation on all these figures because this is Wave 8. You've probably seen these figures by now. They're pretty much all articulated the exact same. But so when the Origins line first came out, they were inspired by the vintage figures, but they weren't necessarily recreating them 100%. So they tried to give us new designs for He-Man and Skeletor's heads. But I think they heard overwhelmingly from the fans that they wanted a classic, like a vintage style head. And so then later releases of He-Man, they gave us the classic head, and even this figure here was repackaged with this head, except blonde, that would match this body. However, I'll be honest, I like this head. I like that it's kind of different. I still have my vintage 80s He-Man from 1982, and I don't necessarily need a straight recreation of him. And I actually like this He-Man head better than the head that we got on the classics figures in the early 2000s or around 2010 or so is when the classics line came out for about a decade or so, and I actually like this one better. So anyway, I do like that Anti-Eternia He-Man has the vintage head. It would have been nice maybe if they gave us a couple head options, so maybe this one and maybe this one in black as well. But at least for me, because I choose to display my He-Man like that, this one here makes him feel a little different. It doesn't feel like just a straight repaint. They actually do look a little bit different, and I like that. Accessories, he's got all the same stuff. So the power sword, just cast in solid black. The shield, black and red. And then he's got the battle axe in solid black that just clips onto the back of his harness. So those are all the same accessories I've got with He-Man. He-Man is missing his power sword. He seems to have dropped it somewhere. But I've got his axe on the back there and his shield. So yeah, very cool. It's a fun figure. It adds some play value. You've already got Skeletor as a bad guy. Then you've got Hordak. Then we've got the Snake Men coming. If they start giving us Anti-He-Man and maybe some other characters from Anti-Eternia, that adds like a whole other faction for He-Man to fight with. And I just think that's a lot of fun. Now, the whole evil doppelganger aspect is, it's cool. It might feel a little redundant in the case of He-Man because we already have Faker, who's a character from the vintage line, who is an evil robot designed to impersonate He-Man. Now you see here, he's got that head, which is based on the vintage figure. So Faker and Anti-Eternia He-Man have the same head here. But I don't know if there's a whole lot more to say about him. The Anti-Eternia figure is, he's not from the vintage line. He actually comes from a pretty interesting spot. So I guess after the cartoon ended in the 80s, there was still Masters of the Universe materials out there. There was books and things like that. So in Europe, they had these like audio cassettes that came with stories, and they're the ones that introduced the idea of Anti-Eternia and Anti-Eternia He-Man. So that's pretty obscure. It comes from some German cassette tape. But this is not the first time that Mattel has dove into this concept. They first gave us an Anti-Eternia He-Man in the Classics line. And even though I have a pretty close to complete Classics collection, I don't have Anti-Eternia He-Man because he was not one of the standard monthly figures that you could buy. The way Classics worked is every month the new figure would go on sale on the 15th of the month, and you had to sign on pretty quick to order it. So I was always there, right at noon at my keyboard waiting to order the newest figures. But Anti-Eternia He-Man was a chase figure which was really annoying. So what they did is he just randomly popped up on the site a couple of times throughout the year, and you had to be just ready to grab them. And I was never able to get my hands on that one. So yeah, I'm really glad that they revisited this obscure little concept in the Origins line, because it gives me a chance to get in a classics figure that I was never able to get. So very cool. I like them. And yeah, so let's move on to the next guy. So next up we've got Sunman. And this guy's got an interesting little history because he is not from the Masters of the Universe toy line originally. So I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on this story. It's relatively new to me. I kind of only learned about it when this figure was announced. But apparently, back in the early 80s, so as I mentioned a minute ago, Masters of the Universe, the original toy line, was introduced in 1982. So apparently there was a young mother in Brooklyn whose son wanted some action figures to play with. And I guess he expressed that he was a little disappointed that there was no characters that looked like him on the toy store shelves, because all the characters of Masters of the Universe and many other toy lines were all white. And so this mother, whose name I'm probably going to mispronounce, but I think it's Ela Eason. So when she couldn't find an African-American toy to get her kid, she decided, well, I'm going to start my own toy company and make my own line of heroes that are based on different minorities. So she started her own toy company called Olmec Toys and put out this line of heroes. I think it was called Warriors of the Sun or something along those lines, with Sunman being the main character. So sort of like He-Man. You know, the toy line wasn't really called He-Man. It was called Masters of the Universe, but he was obviously the central focus. And so that's what she created, He-Man, and or Sunman. And I don't know. I don't know the history of this. I'm kind of surprised that she almost was even able to get away with it, because when you look at those vintage figures, they look a lot like Masters of the Universe. Like, it seems like she just straight up ripped off the body design. And I understand why. She wanted her son to get figures that looked like the real thing that he could buy on, you know, at Toys R Us then. So, you know, she gave him toys that looked just like that, and you could integrate in with your actual toys from Mattel. And I guess it wasn't uncommon. There was lots of knockoffs of big toy lines out there. So I don't know how big this toy line was in the 80s. The Sunman toy line came out in 1985, so a couple of years after the launch of Masters of the Universe. I don't think it was very big. I think there was maybe only one or two figures. I believe 10 in total. And almost all of them were based on, like all the characters were minorities. There was one villain, Pighead. And yeah, I'm not quite sure how the relationship with Olmec Toys and Mattel came to happen, but just a couple of months ago, Mattel announced that they were pairing up with Olmec Toys, and they were going to add Sunman officially to the Masters of the Universe toy line. And so here he is. We've got him, and they're also going to start doing some of the other figures from the line. So Pighead, did I call him Pigman a minute ago? I don't know. Anyway, Pighead, the villain, he's coming back in this line as well. And I think they've shown at least one of the other heroic characters. I don't know if they'll get around to adding all 10 of the figures to the Masters of the Universe line. But anyway, I think adding Sunman and Pighead and a couple others, I think that's pretty cool. So yeah, congrats to Ela Eason and her son for making this happen. Sunman's pretty great. Except for, I don't like this stupid cape that he's got going on here. You can see here, I don't know, it's like wings that snap around his neck. And again, I'm not familiar with the storyline she created for Sunman originally, so I don't know what his deal is, if that is just supposed to be a cape, if maybe they eventually, you know, at rest, these things would just drape behind him, or if they're always stuck out like that, because I don't know how he's ever going to get through a doorway or anything. It is kind of awkward, and I'm thinking about how he's going to display on my shelf. I know he's going to be knocking other characters over, and he's going to kind of take up a lot of room because of this hard, you know, cape, I guess I'll call it, around his neck. It's awkward. Now, it is removable, obviously, so I could choose to take that off, and I might have to take his head off first. There we go. Take the head off, and there we go. Now he doesn't take up so much space. Like, the wing cape is unique, at least. You know, it definitely looks different from everybody else on my shelf. But yeah, I just don't. I don't necessarily love the design. I don't think it's super practical. But anyway, his design is really cool. Otherwise, like I like that big sunburst effect on his chest. I like the face sculpt here. I believe it's pretty accurate to the vintage figure. Yeah, he looks pretty happy. He looks like a nice guy. Cool weapon. It looks like the top of a larger spear, and then he's got a sun logo on his shield, nice and colorful. You know, the red, yellow, and green armor. You know, it looks really sharp. It really pops on the shelf. I think he's a lot of fun. So, you know, the Masters of the Universe, we did eventually get, you know, an African American character in Masters of the Universe the following year. Clamp Champ here, he came out in 1986. But yeah, Ela Eason beat Mattel to the punch by giving us Sunman, and now you can display them together, which is pretty great. Now my Origins display, it's actually got a little bit more diversity than just these two guys, because I've added my Masters of the WWE figures. So I've got Mr. T and who else? Junkyard Dog. So yeah, I've got a couple other guys in there too, so that's pretty cool. So yeah, I really like this guy. I think it's a really interesting story. I like that going forward, Sunman is part of the official Masters of the Universe toy line when he originally started off as basically a knockoff. Yeah, I think that's just really cool. So happy to add him to my collection. Let's move on to the next guy. So next up, we're going to take a look at Clawful. So this is one of Skeletor's evil warriors. Clawful was first introduced in 1984. That's where we got the original toy. And I've always loved Clawful. He's always been kind of one of my favorite characters. However, neither me or my brother owned Clawful when we were kids. You know, we loved our Masters of the Universe toys back then, but we didn't have a whole lot of them. Like I said, I think I owned fewer than 10, which was a pretty small collection for me, considering how many G.I. Joes and Transformers I owned. Masters of the Universe, when I think back on it, I feel like I had a bigger collection, but yeah, ultimately it was probably like 7 or 8 figures. And yeah, Clawful I would have loved to have. You know, I had friends that had him and everything. I just thought he was really neat looking. Such a weird design. And I think they've recreated it pretty good here. The Origins line has been really good about giving us updated versions of those vintage toys. And they look so close to them that I don't think you have to feel bad anymore about not having those vintage toys in your collection. You can go hunt them down if you want to, but I think these guys pretty much scratch that itch, at least for me. So let's take a look at him. He is, you know, a lobster or a crab man. Now he's got an interesting design, kind of a lot like Buzz-Off that I talked about in the last video, and Stratos in the last video. Like, because Buzz-Off is very clearly a bug man, and he looks like a bug man. He's got bug eyes, he's got bug wings. Stratos was kind of weird because he's like a bird man, and yet he has to wear a jetpack and detachable wings. So he's almost like, is he a bird man? You know, I don't know. And with Clawful here, like, sure, he looks like his head, there's no denying. He's kind of crustacean looking with that, you know, rough shell. But then he's got a fleshy human neck and a fleshy human torso, like he's wearing this crab armor over top of it. And then he's got these human arms and human legs. Like, they're not quite human because he's got these bony ridges, which is what we saw on other monstrous characters like Whiplash and stuff. But Whiplash had green legs. Like, I don't know why when they designed Clawful they decided to give him these human fleshy arms. Like, why isn't he red all over? It just makes for this weird design. Like, you can almost think, like, is this crab thing a helmet? Could he take it off? Is he just some guy underneath? I don't know. I don't think so. Like, I think that's his head. It's a weird design choice, but that's kind of that kind of summed up Masters of the Universe. Just a bunch of weirdos. And yeah, I love them. I love the weirdos, and yeah, this is a perfect weirdo. He's got the three-toed monster feet, which again definitely leans towards him not being just some guy in a costume. The big claw, so this is just like the vintage toy head. You could move the claw by pressing the lever there. He's got his little mace that he doesn't hold all that well because of his weird clawed hands. But yeah, he's just a great design. I really love the look of this guy. And those eyebrows. That's another just weird element. Like, why did they give the crab guy the big, bushiest, Burt-like eyebrows? I don't know, but I love it. So there you go. So I didn't have the vintage Clawful, but as I said, he looked a lot like this. So you get the idea. The first Clawful I actually owned was when Masters of the Universe came back in 2002, in what a lot of people refer to as the 2000X line, because it ran for about 3 years, I think, from 2002 to 2004 or whatever. So yeah, it just kind of took on the name 2000X. So there was a new cartoon and there was a new toy line. Unfortunately, it wasn't as successful as Mattel had hoped. So the toy line kind of ended prematurely, as did the cartoon. But they wanted to continue to make some of the characters in toy form after the show and everything had been canceled. But Mattel wasn't interested in making figures or anything anymore. So the sculptors, again, don't check my facts on this. I don't know exactly how it all went down. But anyway, they weren't going to make figures anymore. Maybe it was the toy stores that didn't want to carry them, whatever. So they decided to make statues in scale and affordable with the action figures. So if you had a big collection of Masters of the Universe characters from 2002 and you were sad that some of the characters that appeared on the show didn't end up making it into the toy line, you could get the statues and display them next to them. And I really loved those 2002 designs because they really exaggerated and amped up some of the characters. The old toys here, they all use basically the same body over and over again, so they all looked a lot like they were all kind of the same size for the most part. But here is the 2002, what they call a staction figure, which is statue mixed with action figure. So yeah, this is the Clawful, and I thought he just had an awesome design. You can see how beefy he is. As my friend Chad would say, he is very girthy. So yeah, very cool. Love this design. Great Clawful figure, except that it's not really a figure. But then in the Classics line, like I said, that came out around, it started in about 2009. We got Clawful in 2011. So here's the 2011 Classics Clawful. So you can see how similar he is to the Origins line, which would have made him similar to the Vintage line. But they did do a couple things here that they borrowed a little bit from the 2002 line, in that, like, you see how here his neck, that kind of rough crustacean skin, carries over onto his shoulders, so there's no mistaking him for just a guy in a helmet. They kind of did that here too, where his that texture on his skin and the color of his skin, it kind of bleeds into his shoulders a little bit more, and on his hands there too. It's not just this clear definitive line where the claw starts and stops. It kind of bleeds into his elbow a little bit. So I really like that design element of him. That's a great figure. But then we also got a second Clawful in the Classics line. This one was based on how he appeared in the Filmation cartoon in the 80s, which you can see is quite a bit different. I don't know why the design was so radically different in the cartoon, but it was. And so I think it's pretty great that they gave us an animated version as well, just in case, that's your version of Clawful, and maybe you were disappointed if you loved him in the show that the toy never looked like he did in the show. So now you've got all those options. But I always liked the toy version better. So yeah, I think this new Origins figure looks really great and really captures the look of the Vintage figure and the Classics figure. And I highly recommend him. He's my favorite of this wave. So the last figure we're going to take a look at is the Horde Trooper. So the Horde Trooper, this is a character from the Vintage toy line, but again, I did not have the Vintage Horde Trooper. He first came out in 1986. So the Evil Horde as a faction was introduced in 1985. They appeared in the She-Ra cartoon as her villains, but they appeared in the Masters of the Universe toy line. And I loved the Horde. Like Leech and Mantenna, those are two of my favorite characters from the entire Masters of the Universe lore. So there was a couple of those name guys. So you had Hordak was the leader of the Horde. Then you had Mantenna, Leech, Grizzlor, which I guess you could say were kind of his generals. And then you had the Horde Trooper, which were his nameless henchmen. And these guys were robots. At least that's how they were usually portrayed on the show. Sometimes there was it could have been a little confusing. They acted like individuals now and again. But for the most part, I think it was pretty clear that they were just supposed to be robots. which is great because it allowed, our heroes to actually destroy them. That's one of the problems with those 80s cartoons. Well, I don't know if it's a problem, depending on how you look at it, but nobody was allowed to really get hurt on those shows. So you've got a hero running around with a sword, and yet all you can do is kind of bonk people on the head with the end of it or something. He's not allowed to actually slash into anyone because that would be too violent. But when G.I. Joe introduced the Battle Android Troopers and, He-Man introduced the Horde Troopers, then finally you've got something that can be slashed apart. And, so that's where the Horde Trooper comes from. And yeah, this guy's pretty great. I think it captures the look of that toy pretty well. And you can see one interesting thing to note about him is he does not have any of those shared parts. Like I just said about Clawful, about how the vintage toy line, they reuse the same parts over and over and over again. So you had kind of the human buck, which is the body that He-Man would have used, and Fisto would have used, and Man-at-Arms would have used. Then you had kind of the monster buck that's Skeletor and Clawful. There was only a couple of variations as far as the hands and the feet and all that sort of stuff. But the Horde Trooper, you could tell he was a serious investment from Mattel because he had all unique parts, which makes him, he's not as beefy as most of the other Masters of the Universe characters. Like, he's still a pretty thick figure, but he's not as muscular as most of the other figures in the toy line. Oops. And now for accessories, you see here he's got his spear, which I think pretty much is pretty consistent. I imagine the vintage toy came with something pretty similar. He doesn't seem to hold on to it very well. That's, I don't know if I've really talked about that in my past videos, but the Origins figures do not hold on to their weapons very well. They're made of kind of soft plastic, and their hands, the grip on their hands is not very deep. So when you put things in their hands, it just kind of barely rests there. They don't really grip it very hard. Which is why my He-Man didn't have his sword in his hand, because it probably fell out and I didn't notice it on my shelf. But I find whenever I pick these figures up, they start dropping their accessories very easily. But yeah, I think his articulation is about the same as everybody else. It might be worth talking about a little bit just because he's an entirely different sculpt. But yeah, he looks like he poses pretty well. Head turns, elbows, shoulders, wrists, all that stuff. Now he does have an action feature, which is kind of unique. The vintage toys all had action features. So, you pull their arms back and they could, they would swing forward with a punch, or like Mantenna's eyes bugged out, or Leech would stick to a window with his suction cups. They all had something. The Classics toy line kind of got away from that, and the Origins line typically doesn't have a whole lot of action features either. But this guy here, he does recreate the same action features that the vintage toy had, that if you poke him in this Horde symbol on his chest, let's see if I can do it. You stab him there, and you notice his back popped open. So his armor breaks apart, and that exposes his robotic insides, I guess. Now, you'd think that would be the definitive to explain that, yeah, this guy's a robot. But the fact that his insides are red, and these things here almost look like they could be lungs, it kind of almost makes me think that maybe this guy's a cyborg, like RoboCop. Like they took some bits of a living being and built robotic parts around it, which is almost more disturbing. Like I don't know why they didn't paint this part like black or metal or something like that. But the fact that it's red, that's what I imagine. It seems like he's a cyborg, and it seems kind of gory that you could pop his chest open and look at his lungs. But yeah, I think the intention is just that it's supposed to be his robot insides. But anyway, yeah, very cool figure. I like him a lot. This is the kind of guy that you could troop build if you wanted. So if you want to have a whole army of these guys on your shelf, just buy this guy a whole bunch of times. He was actually released about a year ago in 2 different colors. You could get a black one and a red one, but they were part of I think it was San Diego Comic-Con, maybe PowerCon, the He-Man convention. I can't recall which one. But anyway, he was a convention exclusive. It was a 4-pack, so it was a repainted Hordak, a repainted Grizzlor, and 2 Horde Troopers in different colors. Now, I think that's pretty cool. I would have actually liked to have had that set, but it was ridiculously expensive, and it sold out very quickly, so I never was able to get my hands on it. But since they released that red and black Horde Trooper a while back, it was a foregone conclusion that we would eventually get the standard silver one, so we all knew it was coming. It took them a couple of waves to get to it, but here it is, and I'm glad I have him. I don't intend to army build this guy, just because I don't have a whole lot of display space. I'm already, my Origin shelf is filling up very quickly because they keep putting out figures so fast, and there's so many vehicles coming out that it's just, yeah, I don't know where these things are going to go pretty soon. But anyway, let's do a couple of comparisons. So I didn't have the vintage Horde Trooper, but the Classics line did give us a Horde Trooper in 2013. So here is the classic Horde Trooper. Now the Horde Trooper came in a 2-pack, so I actually have 2 of them from my classics. So there you go. I do have a little army going here. And they came with a variety of weapons. There are some slight differences. You can see this guy here has a blast effect up here on his, I don't know, neck guard, which the other guy does not have. So it helps distinguish them a little bit. And I've got this guy displayed with this one kind of rod, electrocuting rod weapon, where the other guy, I've got him with his spear and his Horde shield. So that's pretty cool. Maybe if this guy came with a more of a variety of weapons, I might be more inclined to get a second or third version of him, because if I could display them with different weapons as I have with these guys, it just, you know, it adds a little diversity to your shelf, to your display. But I don't really like buying, you know, the same thing that just looks identical. He's holding the same weapon, same paint job. But yeah, I would definitely get the black and the red one if they ever decide to release those ones as part of the main line at retail. Now I do have one other figure. He's not quite a Horde Trooper. This is a character that was released in 2016 called General Sundar. And he was like the general of the Horde Troopers. And so you see he's got a very similar design. The armor is basically the same, but he's got a cape. He doesn't have that big Horde logo on his chest. And you see I've got him displayed here with this alien purple face. But he actually came with 3 different heads. The head, he had like more of a human head, which is how he actually appeared in the cartoon. But I happen to like this purple one better, so that's how I display him in my classics display over there. So there you go. There's the Horde Trooper. I think he's pretty cool. He's a nice addition. Yeah, I really like that kind of, that plastic they used for him. Like, it's got a nice metallic, like, he's not reflective, but it, you know, it's a little shinier than the plastic we got on the other figures. So he looks metallic. It's a cool plastic. I like how they did that. Okay, so that was my review of Masters of the Universe Origins Wave 8. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and please leave me comments below. I like hearing from you guys. So yeah, please type up some comments. Anyway, that's it for now. I'll be back soon with another video. I still have a whole pile of toys over there to review. I'm way behind. So yeah, stay tuned. I'll be back soon. So have a good one.